Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, so imagine you're way up in the mountains, right? The air is thin, you're breathing hard. Most of us, we'd be thinking about altitude sickness, not exactly a fun vacation vibe.
Right.
But what if I told you that same thin air could actually be life-saving? That's what we're diving into today, the potential of low oxygen environments to treat a really devastating genetic disease called Leigh Syndrome.
It really is a fascinating paradox, isn't it? We usually think of oxygen as being so essential for life and health.
Right, absolutely.
But in this case, too much oxygen is actually the problem.
It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit. So we got a few things to work with here. A press release about this new drug called HypoxyStat and a health news article that breaks it all down. And of course, the actual scientific paper with all the nitty-gritty details. The question is, could this drug be the key to helping kids with Leigh syndrome live longer, healthier lives?
The research is certainly very promising, but to really understand how it all works, we need to start with the basics. The mitochondria. You see, mitochondria are these tiny little power plants inside almost every cell in our body. Their job is to use oxygen to create energy. It's basically the fuel that keeps us going.
But with Leigh syndrome, those power plants are like malfunctioning.
Right. Exactly. In Leigh syndrome, the mitochondria can't use oxygen efficiently. This leads to a buildup of unused oxygen in the tissues, and that excess oxygen can actually cause damage and cell death.
So it's not a lack of oxygen that's the problem. It's actually too much.
That's right.
Wow.
It is a bit counterintuitive. It's like having a car engine that's flooded with fuel, but it can't burn it properly.
Yeah.
So the engine stalls. And in the case of Leigh syndrome, this translates to damaged cells and organs.
And this is where that low oxygen idea comes in.
Precisely. Researchers have discovered that by reducing the amount of oxygen available to the cells, it can actually help prevent that harmful buildup. In fact, there was this groundbreaking study back in 2016 where they exposed mice with Leigh syndrome to a low oxygen environment, mimicking the conditions you'd find at high altitudes.
Oh, wow. What happened to the mice?
They showed really significant improvements.
Really?
It was a breakthrough finding, and it really paved the way for the development of this new drug, HypoxyStat.
So this HypoxyStat, it's essentially like trying to recreate that low oxygen environment, but in a pill form, right? Instead of sending everyone to live on a mountaintop?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Instead of altering the external environment, sending people up to the mountains, HypoxyStat actually targets the way our body carries and delivers oxygen. It focuses on hemoglobin, the molecule in our red blood cells that's responsible for picking up oxygen from the lungs and transporting it throughout the body.
So HypoxyStat is kind of messing with hemoglobin somehow?
It does. In a very clever way, HypoxyStat makes hemoglobin bind to oxygen more tightly, which means less oxygen gets released into the tissues. It's kind of like turning down the flow rate on a faucet. You're not turning off the water completely, you're just reducing the amount that comes out.
And that mimics what happens naturally in a low oxygen environment.
Exactly. By reducing the amount of oxygen delivered to the tissues, HypoxyStat effectively recreates those therapeutic effects of high altitude. And what's even more interesting is that this isn't the first time scientists have looked at this compound. It was originally being investigated as a potential treatment for sickle cell anemia.
Oh, wow. So they kind of repurposed it for Leigh syndrome.
That's right. It's a great example of how scientific discoveries in one area can sometimes have these unexpected applications in other fields.
That's really cool. Okay, so let's get to the heart of it, this new research with the mice. What exactly did they do and what did they find?
They used a special breed of mice that were genetically modified to develop Leigh syndrome. This allowed them to very carefully study the effects of HypoxyStat on the disease progression.
So how did they actually test the drug?
They divided the mice into different groups. Some mice received HypoxyStat before they started showing any symptoms of Leigh syndrome, while others received the drug after symptoms had already developed. And of course, they had a control group of mice that didn't receive any treatment.
I'm guessing they tracked what happened to all the mice over time.
Absolutely. They monitored their lifespan, their weight, their movement, even looked at their brain structure using imaging techniques to see how HypoxyStat was affecting their overall health and the progression of the disease.
Sounds pretty comprehensive. So what did they find? Did HypoxyStat actually work?
The results were incredibly encouraging. The mice that received HypoxyStat before they developed symptoms, they didn't develop the same severe brain lesions, muscle weakness, or coordination problems that the untreated mice did.
So the drug was actually preventing the disease from taking hold.
It certainly seems that way. And what's even more remarkable is that the mice that received HypoxyStat after they were already showing symptoms, even those with existing brain damage, actually saw some of those issues reversed.
Wait, they got better. That's amazing.
It is a truly remarkable finding. It suggests that HypoxyStat might be able to do more than just slow down the progression of Leigh syndrome. It might actually be able to heal some of the damage that's already been done.
This is huge news for families dealing with this disease. But before we get too carried away, it is important to remember that this research was done in mice, not humans.
You are absolutely right. While mouse models are incredibly valuable for scientific research, they don't perfectly replicate human biology. We can't just assume that what works in mice will automatically translate to humans.
So we need to be cautiously optimistic. But this is definitely a promising step forward. And this is just part one of our deep dive. We've got a lot more to unpack.
I'm ready to dig deeper. Let's explore what these findings mean for the future of Leigh syndrome treatment and the broader implications of manipulating oxygen delivery. So we just left off with those pretty incredible results from that mouse study. Like reversing brain damage, even partially, that's a really big deal. But how does HypoxyStat actually work at the molecular level? What's the science behind this whole less oxygen is more idea?
Well, it's all about fine-tuning this very delicate balance. We need oxygen to survive, of course, but for individuals with Leigh syndrome, their cells really struggle to process that oxygen effectively.
Right. It's like their internal power plants are getting overloaded.
Exactly. Now, remember how we talked about hemoglobin being responsible for carrying oxygen throughout the body?
Yeah, like a microscopic delivery service.
Well, imagine if you could actually control exactly how much oxygen each delivery truck was unloading at its destination. That's essentially what HypoxyStat does.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does it pull that off?
So HypoxyStat works by binding to hemoglobin in a very specific way, forming what's called a shift base. It's a reversible chemical reaction that essentially tweaks how tightly hemoglobin holds onto the oxygen.
So it's like HypoxyStat is subtly adjusting the grip of those oxygen delivery trucks.
Precisely. And this seemingly small change actually has a really big impact. By making hemoglobin bind oxygen more tightly, HypoxyStat reduces the amount of oxygen that gets released to the tissues, effectively mimicking a lower oxygen environment.
And that's what helps prevent that harmful buildup of oxygen that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how something so complex can come down to such a target interaction at the molecular level.
It really does highlight the elegance of biological systems.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that while reducing oxygen delivery seems to be beneficial in this case of Leigh syndrome, our bodies have evolved to function within a very specific oxygen range.
So there are risks involved. We can't just go around messing with oxygen levels willy-nilly.
Exactly. The researchers highlight that long-term use of any hypoxia-mimicking therapy, including HypoxyStat, needs to be carefully evaluated for potential side effects.
The press release actually mentioned something about potential cardiovascular risks. What's the connection there?
So one of the body's natural responses to a low oxygen environment is to increase red blood cell production. It's like our system is trying to compensate by creating more vehicles to transport oxygen.
Makes sense. More red blood cells, more oxygen carriers.
Right. However, this compensatory mechanism, while helpful in the short term, it can become problematic over time. Increased red blood cell production can lead to a thickening of the blood, which can put a strain on the heart.
So there's a potential risk of heart problems down the line if this isn't carefully managed.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act. The researchers acknowledge this challenge and suggest exploring ways to mitigate these risks, potentially, by combining HypoxyStat with other medications that can help regulate red blood cell production.
So more research is needed, but the potential benefits here are huge.
Absolutely. And the exciting thing is that this approach to manipulating oxygen delivery might have applications far beyond just Leigh syndrome. Other mitochondrial diseases, certain types of brain injuries, even heart attacks and strokes. These are all conditions where controlling oxygen levels could be really key to minimizing damage and improving outcomes.
That's incredible. We're talking about a completely new way of thinking about and treating a whole range of diseases.
And the development of HypoxyStat is really just the beginning. The researchers are already working on creating what they call second-generation versions of the drug.
Second generation, what would make them different?
They're looking for compounds that have even better what we call pharmacological properties, meaning they're absorbed and processed by the body more effectively, potentially leading to increased effectiveness and fewer side effects.
So finding that right balance between efficacy, safety, and deliverability, that's the holy grail here.
Exactly. And it's also worth noting that this research opens up some really intriguing ethical questions, about how we manipulate these fundamental biological processes like oxygen delivery.
That's a really important point. Just because we can manipulate something doesn't necessarily mean that we always should.
Exactly. There are always broader societal implications to consider when we're talking about these groundbreaking medical advancements. I think it's crucial to have these open and thoughtful discussions about the potential benefits and the risks.
This has definitely been an eye-opening deep dive so far. We've talked about the science, the potential, and even some of the challenges and ethical considerations surrounding HypoxyStat.
And we've still got more ground to cover. We'll delve further into those future applications, the limitations of the current research, and explore what other promising avenues researchers are exploring in this world of oxygen modulation therapy.
All right, so we've covered so much in this deep dive, from like malfunctioning mitochondria to actually tweaking hemoglobin's grip on oxygen. It's clear that HypoxyStat has this potential to be a total game changer. What's the timeline here? When can we actually expect to see this drug helping people?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? As promising as these mouse study results are, we can't forget that there's still quite a long road ahead before HypoxyStat could potentially be used to treat humans.
Right, it's not like we can just start handing out pills tomorrow.
Exactly. The next really crucial step is to actually move beyond those mouse models and conduct studies in larger animals, like primates. Their biology is much closer to ours, and so those studies are really going to give researchers a much better understanding of how HypoxyStat behaves in a system that's more similar to our own.
Okay, and assuming those studies go, well, what's next? Then human clinical trials.
That's definitely the ultimate goal. If the preclinical studies in primates confirm that HypoxyStat is safe and effective, then researchers can actually start designing and conducting clinical trials in humans. And those trials would likely start with patients with Leigh Syndrome, since that's the condition that's been studied the most extensively so far.
It's amazing to think that we might be on the cusp of, a whole new era in treating mitochondrial diseases.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about HypoxyStat's potential applications for other conditions besides just Leigh syndrome. When might we see trials for those?
It's really hard to give a precise timeline, but I suspect that once HypoxyStat's safety and efficacy have been established in humans for Leigh syndrome, then researchers will start exploring its potential for other conditions, including other mitochondrial diseases, certain brain injuries, and even potentially heart attack and stroke recovery.
So a long road ahead, but potentially a really impactful one. And it's not just about HypoxyStat itself. This whole field of oxygen modulation therapy seems like it's just getting started.
Absolutely. The development of HypoxyStat has really opened up this new frontier in medicine. It's made us realize that we can potentially fine-tune oxygen delivery in these very precise ways, and that has implications for such a wide range of conditions where oxygen plays a really critical role.
So what are some of the other exciting developments in the field? What else is on the horizon?
Well, one area that I find particularly fascinating is the use of nanotechnology to deliver oxygen directly to specific cells or tissues.
Nanotechnology? That sounds incredibly futuristic. Are we talking about like microscopic robots carrying oxygen molecules?
Not quite robots, but the idea is to create these tiny particles that can actually encapsulate oxygen and then transport it directly to where it's needed most in the body. This could be a total game changer for conditions where a particular organ or tissue is being starved for oxygen.
Wow, so instead of flooding the entire body with oxygen, we could potentially deliver it in a much more targeted and controlled way.
Exactly. And that could be particularly beneficial in cases where excess oxygen can actually be harmful, such as with certain types of brain injuries or even during the recovery period after a heart attack.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any other approaches that researchers are exploring?
Another very promising avenue is gene therapy, which aims to actually address the root cause of mitochondrial dysfunction by correcting the faulty genes that are responsible for those malfunctioning cellular power plants.
Oh, wow. So instead of just manipulating oxygen delivery, we could potentially fix the problem at its source.
Exactly. It's a pretty bold idea, and there are definitely challenges involved in developing these safe and effective gene therapies, but the potential benefits are just enormous.
It really feels like we're on the verge of like a real paradigm shift in medicine, moving away from just treating symptoms and towards actually addressing the underlying causes of disease.
I completely agree, and I think this shift is only going to accelerate as our understanding of oxygen's role in health and disease continues to grow.
Well, I think we've explored a lot of this deep dive, from the intricacies of cellular respiration to the potential for manipulating oxygen delivery to treat a wide range of conditions. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has been. And for our listeners, I hope you've come away with a new appreciation for this vital role that oxygen plays in our lives and all the incredible possibilities that lie ahead in harnessing its power to improve human health.
Remember, scientific exploration is a continuous process. There's always more to learn. So stay curious, stay informed, and who knows what amazing breakthroughs we'll be discussing in future deep dives.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by Todo Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.